This is part of my own work. I am the original author, and it is subject to change because it's very first drafty and just a random chapter pick. Acoustic Blackout. The novel was called Chapter 6, Orbital Command. Several shining dots glinted in the purple giant crescent of planet Nibral, hanging in the blackness of space. As the dots got closer, they resolved into the Sentry's ships and their war fleet, returning to base from Operation Archangel. Their base was the immense and slow-moving station ship, Orbital Command. Hanging against the stars, a light grey torus shape, with various antennas on top, and glowing tunnels visible, was like a termite mound of activity, with many species of alien preparing to receive the wounded, and the ships of the war convoy bringing back tons of logistical goods, supplies, and vehicles. As the missile boats escorted the dropships to one of the main hangars, a whoosh of sound from the engines became apparent to the exhausted sentry team on board. The presence of sound was the presence of the mighty station's oxygen supply, as if it were an atmosphere. The hangar and cargo area was a vast dark deck, enclosed like a grey cave, with various members of the purple aliens of the Sentry's race, guiding in each incoming ship with hand beacons, and preparing fuel machines and the like to maintain them. "Stand to attention," said Krenal, turning towards his team as they wearily exited the dropship. The sentries, in their distinct coloured suits of armour, quickly and casually assembled into a scattered line in front of him and saluted. Krenal stood proudly in front of them to debrief. "I'm going to report to Command Council in a minute, but for now I'm giving you all a 2-hour leave from your duties. Be sure to assemble here within that time. Keep punctual," informed Krenal, and headed off towards the command quarters. The command room was an odd shape, a half-dome with shining iron pillars and chrome trimming around a central table, which was crescent-shaped, so all sat at it faced inward to the door. At the table sat Krenal's 10 superior commanders, the command council. Their faces were dark purplish-brown or purplish-grey and leathery, with the usual 2 short tusks protruding from their upper jaws. They were far older than Krenal, and it was imagined far wiser. "Your helm is not required, Sergeant Zafris. You are in the company of friends now," said one of the superiors. Despite being in the presence of superior commanders, Krenal hesitated for a moment. He looked behind him to check the door was correctly sealed, and then sized up his bosses as if studying them for signs of deception. "Well?" another superior groaned. Krenal nodded. He reached for the 2 black hooks on his shoulders that secured his helmet, and pulled them aside, and with a heavy metal clang his helmet sprang off his face into a holster upon his back. His face was much like any of the people in his species, a deep purple skin, mottled in places with brown and grey coloration, with some lilac highlights. He had the 2 tusks extending from his upper jaw, spanned by a thin, A-shaped sheath, hiding his lower jaw, and the flexible tendrils that hung from his head were almost like dreadlocks made of flesh. He bowed silently before the command members and stood near the end of the table. An elder council member, more brown and grey than anything else, croaked slowly. "Tell us of this fate of the last Archangel." "Gone, sir," Krenal responded. There was a pregnant pause. Krenal continued. "The missile boat pilots defended us with a firewall, but the beast was all but finished. We could not give chase past the firewall. He escaped, but he is their last." The elder nodded. "Then planet Nibral and its inhabitants are safe?" Krenal pondered and then nodded. "Without any females left, the last Archangel cannot breed. He seems battle-weary. I believe he will retreat to live out his last days in comfort." The council members seemed to consider this amongst themselves, and then offer sounds of agreement. "We will not send more missions to Nibral, unless he becomes a menace." There was quiet, patience, room for Cranal to think. After a steady minute, Cranal hazarded, "The Archangel Commander challenged us through the fire. He spoke of his world being turned to ashes, the original trigger for the Archangel's war on the other worlds. Do we know the cause?" A tall, strong-framed, bluish general stirred in his seat, and eyed an admiral close by as if deciding whether to share secret information. He said finally, "We have some evidence that explains that a successfully detonated Acoustic Blackout device destroyed the Archangel's original planet." Cranal frowned. The phrase seemed strange. It had not been in his vocabulary. "Acoustic Blackout device, General?" The general looked down at his hands on the table, worriedly. A woman alien in a velvet gown, another general, spoke up from the other side of the crescent table. "Arcan, we should put Cranal on this mission. His team can follow it up." With a resigned exhale, General Arcan, who had spoken before, scrutinized Cranal, and then exposed the secret that was troubling him. "Sergeant Zafris, a tragedy has befallen us, friend. 2 years ago, a device was stolen from our homeworld. The class of device was an acoustic blackout bomb. Terrorists moved on a heavily guarded convoy that was moving it to an off-world store planet via a disused trade route. They stole it, used it on the Archangel's planet. We've been keeping this little embarrassment under wraps from the public back at home because, as you know, it triggered this little war we've got our hands dirtied in. Those Archangels were so ruthless, killed millions while escaping their dead world and invading others. But we would not have needed to euthanize them if we had guarded our convoys better." The general let a pause in. Cranal got in his questions to clarify his thoughts. "General, this bomb can destroy a world? By what means?" General Arcan rolled his eyes a little, as if he was not prepared to dig into the complicated explanations of the workings of a superweapon. He conferred with the scientists on the panel, and then spoke, putting it into his own words. An acoustic blackout class device is a sound bomb. If it successfully activates, and that is not guaranteed, it creates strong vibrational waves through solid rock towards the core of a planet. It shakes the molecules of all matter in a chain reaction. If it fails, it can create an earthquake. If it succeeds, it can turn your world to ashes. That is to say, the world still exists, but it is unrecognizable. All that was on the surface gone. Nothing can survive it. Ironically, what is left is very fertile. While everything is destroyed, only canyons and a strange, fertile ashen soil remain. The Archangels who survived had lost everything and abandoned their home. But we saw lights on the Archangel's destroyed planet recently. Someone is trying to plant crops down there." There was the obligatory polite pause for Cranal to speak. "So the Archangel leader was right. He had nowhere to go. Though I do not condone their mass slaughter of their neighbors, I must state how angry I am to have been involved in this culling. Were the Archangels innocent? I would have more to say, but it is true they brought this war upon themselves. What is this mission that General Ch6A spoke of?" Many council members gave off a guilty aura in their expressions at Cranal's condemnation, but others seemed more hardened to it. The woman in the velvet gown, Ch6A, spoke. "I'm sorry to say, Sergeant, we need you to stop this happening a second time. Some of us are very sorry to have waged this 2-year war against the Archangels. And it is with a heavy heart I must inform you that another blackout device was found to have been stolen yesterday." Cranal was shocked, suddenly unable to hide his emotions. His mouth agape, he shuffled on the spot. You lost?" General Ch6A broke protocol, not letting him have his response time. It was a punishment to his irrational show of emotion, and she had needed to continue. "Sergeant, contain yourself. Or maybe I was too quick to offer your skills to General Arcan for this mission?" Colonel found it in him to contain his reactions. Good. As I was saying, yesterday, a second acoustic blackout device was stolen. Luckily we have no others in convoy. They're all locked up in the vaults. The stolen device has a designation Mechanism 8. We had twice as much security on that convoy, so don't blame us. Cruisers, decimators, barrage ships. The fleet was so large and secure, we expected no resistance in a potential battle. But a Blackguard fleet came, using tactics we've never seen. They had a smaller armada, a sunburner ship, and tactics. The digestive pause was gifted to Crenal, finally. His eyes flitted about the ceiling, absorbing this. Ambushed, twice the security, but the Blackguard are mercenaries. Mercenaries, yes, she said. Armies for hire, and not often very organized at that. But this group was. So organized by whom? Who are they looking for, Crenal? And where did they take Mech 8? These questions form the basis of your mission. And to take a covert guerrilla fighting approach. To stop this one wrecking another world and causing more potential messy wars. After the shock had subsided and Crenal had calmed down, he accepted the orders. Crenal saluted. He reached for a switch on his armor, and his heavy metal helm swung back over his head with a loud clang as he turned to leave the dome-shaped command room. He was a killer, no doubts there, in the same way as soldiers are sent to war to kill, but he had compartmentalized his ethics and morality. He weighed up amounts in the game of death, a life of an unknown, a life of a loved one, a planet of killers, a planet of innocents. He lived in this peculiar honor code that many would become lost in with him. All he knew then was if this superweapon could turn a world to ashes, would the survivors become nomadic homeless killers themselves, or placid lost peoples, vulnerable without their world? And what of the terrorists, and the Blackguard, and their new leaders? And whose lights were those down on the Archangel's ashen planet, planting seeds in the small colonies? Questions of morality swam through Crenal's mind as he left the briefing room. He had to find Mech 8. And I'll throw in this next one because it's like a short additional chapter that I wrote later, and it's short and interesting, and the character in it plays a big role much later. Chapter 6B, Kerosene Farm. As Crenal left on his way to the docking bays, a thought struck him. He pulled a dusty red communicator out from his black securing bands on the right of his waist and spoke into it. Hearn, it's Crenal. We've been given a great mission. But first I need you to check something out. It's not far from here, it won't take long. A dusty brown-red desert surrounded Corporal Hearn, the grey-green sentry. His tan cape rustled briefly in the wind as he left his home ship, landed on this desert planet. It was a short walk to reach the geographical feature Crenal had mentioned, where the lights were. It was daytime, and the sun baked through a toffee-coloured sky. Walking over a ridge, the landscape flattened out, and a thin mechanical spire and funnel, spewing thick black smoke, could be seen on the horizon of this barren place. Nearer still, Hearn could see was the location of where the lights would be turned on at night. 3 lanterns, some weather vane devices, several long pools of oil, and other fuming petrochemicals weaved a grid of dug-lined pits along the ground. Around these small aliens worked, overseen by a taller one, a creature in a white, wet-look plastic lab coat suit that curved into a long, slender cylinder, like a snout, a gas mask over his nose and mouth. "You there," Hearn said, brazenly calling the leader. He turned, and his eyes, covered by the white glass eyepieces of the gas mask, seemed to stare. The aliens surrounded him had momentarily stopped to look up, nervous, as if doing something they weren't supposed to be. The leader remained composed and calm, almost frighteningly so. A sentry, yes? Hearn nodded briefly. Who are you? What are you doing out here, in the destroyed lands of the Archangels? He glanced back at the nervous creatures and gestured them to continue their work, which seemed to be either moving equipment or spraying the pools with something. I am Snook, a simple kerosene farmer, I assure you. Hearn cocked his head in strange surprise. A kerosene farmer? Out here? Have you a permit? Snook held his arms wide to the side. The Archangels are gone, aren't they? Terrible folk. Did you know they slaughtered 80,000 Nebralese when they didn't want this place anymore and moved off-world? Barbaric, to say the least. And what's wrong with it? It's a fertile land. The white begas-masked man walked slowly and gracefully across the sand and paused a short walk from Hearn. The loose red sand breezed at their feet. Snook got out a white-grey triangular device from his pocket, and Hearn scanned it with his helm as it came out. It was not a weapon. The device extended out a rod of white plastic, only a hand in height, which flattened out into a white-rimmed, black screen facing Hearn, with strange green language written all over the tablet's face. My warrant from the trade routes. It is to your liking? Hearn eyed the tablet and looked up at Snook again. Legal, so it seems. Snook let the device fold up again in its smooth fashion. Then, if you'll excuse me, I must return to running my operation. He turned slowly and walked back to his oil pits. Humph, Hearn murmured, unsatisfied. He turned to leave for his ship.